Albania, under Enver Hoxha, Europe's most isolated communist state in the aftermath of World War II. Albania emerged from the ashes of occupation and civil war to become one of the most rigid, isolated, and ideologically extreme communist regimes in the world. Ruled with an iron fist by Enver Hoxha, Albania transformed from a largely agrarian and underdeveloped country into a tightly controlled dictatorship, severing ties not only with the capitalist West but eventually with its communist allies as well. Between 1946 and 1991, Albania became known as the North Korea of Europe, a place where isolationism, surveillance, atheism, and autocracy reigned. Rise of Enver Hoxha and communist rule. After the defeat of Axis forces in the Balkans, Albania's communist partisans, led by Enver Hoxha, seized power in 1944. By 1946, Albania was officially declared a People's Republic, and Hoxha became first secretary of the Party of Labour of Albania, position he held until his death in 1985. Inspired by Marxism-Leninism, Hoxha implemented Soviet-style collectivization, nationalization of industries, land reforms, and strict censorship. Political opponents were labeled enemies of the people and executed, imprisoned, or sent to forced labor camps. The new regime eliminated political pluralism, crushed dissent, and constructed a one-party totalitarian state centered around Hoxha's cult of personality. Isolation from the world, breaking with allies. Albania's international relationships were turbulent even with fellow communist nations. Hoxha's foreign policy was defined by an intense desire to preserve ideological purity. 1948 broke ties with Yugoslavia after Tito split with Stalin, accusing Tito of revisionism. 1961 severed relations with the Soviet Union after Khrushchev denounced Stalin. Hoxha considered de-Stalinization a betrayal of Marxist principles. 1978 cut off from China, its last major ally, when Deng Xiaoping began opening up China's economy. By the late 1970s, Albania had isolated itself from the entire world, both East and West. The regime insisted that Albania must rely solely on its own strength, a policy known as self-reliance or vetabisim, a nation of bunkers and fear. One of the most bizarre legacies of Hoxha's rule is the proliferation of concrete bunkers across the Albanian landscape. Paranoid about a foreign invasion from NATO, Yugoslavia, or even former allies, the regime built an estimated 170,000 to 750,000 bunkers. These tiny, dome-shaped fortifications were scattered across cities, mountains, and beaches, though they were never used for their intended purpose. The Hoxha regime also created a vast and oppressive secret police force, the Sigurimi, which surveilled, interrogated, and terrorized citizens. Albanians lived in constant fear of being reported for disloyalty, leading to widespread mistrust among families, friends, and neighbors. The atheist state in 1967. Hoxha launched a radical cultural campaign and declared Albania the world's first atheist state. All religious practices were banned. Mosques, churches, monasteries, and religious schools were shut down, desecrated, or converted into cultural centers or warehouses. Religious leaders were imprisoned or executed, and owning a Bible or Quran could lead to imprisonment. Albanians were raised under strict state atheism, and religious identity was effectively erased for an entire generation. Economic misery and decline. Hoxha's policies failed to bring prosperity. Albania remained one of the poorest countries in Europe, with food shortages, blackouts, and inadequate infrastructure. The economy was centrally planned and inefficient, with little industrial or technological advancement. Basic goods were rationed, travel abroad was forbidden, and contact with foreigners was tightly controlled. Education and healthcare improved somewhat, but at the cost of personal freedom and opportunity. The fall of the regime after Enver Hoxha's death in 1985, his hand-picked successor, Ramiz attempted minor reforms. But with communism collapsing across Eastern Europe, by 1989, Albania could no longer sustain its isolation. Mass protests broke out in 1990, driven by economic desperation and a desire for freedom. By 1991, the communist regime collapsed, and Albania began its transition to democracy, although the legacy of Hoxha's rule remained deeply embedded in its institutions. Culture and trauma. Legacy and memory today, Albania continues to grapple with the legacy of Hoxha's dictatorship. Many former Sigurimi files remain sealed, and transitional justice has been limited. Concrete bunkers still, the countryside some converted into cafes, art spaces, or memorials. Public opinion on Hoxha is deeply divided, while many remember him as a tyrant. A small segment still praises his anti-corruption stance and national independence. The period from 1946 to 1990 remains a painful and defining era in Albania's modern history at time, when the country cut itself off from the world in pursuit of an ideological utopia that never came.